The mission of FSU Coach is to prepare and equip the next generation of coaches and sports professionals with best practices and current research to enable them to pursue excellence. We have 2 academic programs, the online graduate certificate, which is 4 classes, and also a 10-class master's in athletic coaching. Our graduate certificate and master's program can be started at any time, either the summer, fall, or spring.
The types of classes that we offer focus on the athlete as a whole person. We focus on the theory and practice, the research, the helping skills. I came to FSU Coach because I truly believed in the mission and the purpose of the program.
I think I have my dream job being a head coach at Florida State, but I know there's always more ways that I can help my athletes and better prepare as a coach. If you're interested in going into coaching or joining the FSU Coach program, I would just say don't even think about it and do it.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. It's hard to believe this is season 6 of this show. We've been doing this since we started it back in COVID, so it's a kind of surreal moment each and every season. My first guest is appropriate for this show because we've got a lot of interesting and heavy stuff to discuss to some extent. Dr. Andrew Ramjit joins me from the Florida Coaches Coalition. Andrews, thanks so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about how you got into this role as executive director. What do you do? Let's go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you very much, Tim, FSU Coach, for having me on this morning. So my name, Dr. Andrew Ramjit. I'm the executive director, like you said, of the Florida Coaches Coalition. We launched in December of 2021. At the time, I was serving as the county athletic director for Brevard Public Schools, one of the 50 largest school districts in the country. I believe at the time it was number 7 in Florida. But one thing I noticed in the 3 years that I was in the job was the influx of coaches that were leaving Florida and were leaving Brevard County specifically. And when I would inquire and have conversations with those coaches, they really, a majority of them, said it was because of the lack of pay. The pay did not match up for the time that they were away from their families or the pay that they were receiving in other states. Georgia, Texas, South Carolina was much more than what they were receiving in Brevard County and Florida in general. Looking more into the issue, came to realize that it wasn't just one county. It was all 67 counties and coaches in all 67 counties that were experiencing these same issues. Now, I got my start coaching back in 2011 out in Miramar, Florida, and pay was terrible. We knew pay was terrible. And it was one of those things where it was one of those unspoken rules where you could not say it out loud. You didn't want to say it out loud to get the district upset. You didn't want to get teacher unions upset. So, I ended up stepping away from coaching, moving into school administration, eventually became a principal, then, became a district administrator out in Brevard. But when I was in Brevard and I saw the struggle that these coaches were facing, it really affected me. And I said, you know what, I think I'm in a position here where I can try to make some change happen. I spoke with the teacher union that said, nope, not happening. Essentially, any extra money that we have at the end of the day, that needs to be pumped back into teacher salaries, right? Or that needs to be used for other supplemented positions at schools, your chorus instructor, your band director. They thought that coaches were being paid appropriately for each hour worked, which they weren't. Tried speaking to the school district superintendent at the time, and he kind of blew off the whole idea of even broaching the topic with the union. So I said, you know what? I think that I have a specific skill set of amplifying certain issues, and I think I can amplify this issue to a point where it will gain the recognition it needs by the people that can make decisions. So took a leap of faith, December 2021, launched the organization. Now, 4 years later, we have a staff of 12. We have a little over 16,000 members in the state of Florida. And we're actually making substantial progress here when it comes to making sure that coaches are paid appropriately, at least minimum wage for each hour that they work in all sports. And sorry if that was a little long-winded.
No, not at all. Clearly, I have a number of questions based on that, but I also want to mention, for those of you who are watching live, if you do have a question for Andrew, be sure to get it in your chat box. We'll get it to him, and hopefully you can get that answered during the live show. I want to go back to the teacher unions, because there may be this assumption, well, as a teacher union, if you pay teachers more, the coaches benefit anyway. But I remember even when I met you back when you were an county athletic director in Brevard, you told me that about 50% of your coaches were not working in the school system. So anything that does supplement a teacher's pay only affects maybe 50% of those coaches anyway, which I think maybe a number of people just don't realize. There's this assumption, maybe in other states where it is required, in order to coach, you have to teach, but not so in Florida. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, majority of the counties here in Florida, I would say over the last 10, 15 years have faced a substantial issue where your staff on campus, your teachers, they do not want to take on these positions. So that leaves these school districts and these schools in the position of trying to find anyone that they can to bring in to essentially coach the program. So you're seeing more and more school districts all across the state bringing in community members, volunteers to coach your high school athletic teams, right? And actually, when I left Brevard in 2023, the split was 30% of the coaches in the school district were actual teachers and 70% were community members. And in Brevard, you have Cape Canaveral, and you had a lot of the NASA community, believe it or not, would actually after work come out and coach, which for me was just wow, because starting off my career in Broward County, you had to be employed by the school district, but you've just seen more and more school districts kind of loosen up their policies on that. And now that the state is requiring that all athletic coaches go through a level 2 background check, I think that opens it up more for a bigger pool of community members to step into those roles if needed.
Why are there less teachers coaching?
I think just from what the coalition has surveyed, coaches across the state, all 67 counties, and what it comes back to is a few things. One, the responsibilities that they have as teachers, it extends past your normal 9-to-5 workday, right? They have to take papers home to grade. They have just other responsibilities, so they can't necessarily allocate the time to coach and to be a good coach, right? The second thing, and this is the one that we've heard the most, it is compensation. When you're paid a flat supplement, you're not necessarily being paid for each hour that you work. For example, and I always use this example, we did a survey of high school football coaches in the state of Florida, and high school football is what really keeps most athletic programs in the state running because of the gates that you pull in on Friday nights. And the average high school coach in Florida, and I believe it was a little over 80 respondents, the average time that they stated that they worked on a yearly basis was 1,500 hours. The average supplement in the state of Florida is 3,750. That breaks down to, I believe, $2.50 per hour, for each hour that you work. And I just don't know anyone who would be willing to put in that time to undergo that type of scrutiny and have to deal with all of the extras, that come with the position just for $2.50. That's just unacceptable.
Well, I think also something that you've mentioned in social media as well is that's just discussing the actual contact time during school hours or the school year, not to mention summers when a lot of coaches are starting their preseason essentially running practices and not getting paid. And then there are also the issues of what if these coaches make playoffs? What if their season is extended 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks? Do they get compensation for that as well? These things don't really seem to be a focus, shall we say, for administration to make sure that those coaches are compensated well.
No, and I think it was News for Jacks. The sports editor, his name's Justin Barney, did a wonderful article last November on coaches' compensation, and I think now 33 of the 67 school districts do pay some type of quote unquote bonus for coaches making the postseason, but it I think averaged out to less than $100, right? Which you think about it, you're going another 4 weeks outside, 4 or 5 weeks outside of your regular season. You're only getting paid $100. That's ridiculous. And you ask any coach that's ramping up to a state title game, they're putting in more hours during those weeks than they are, let's say, that first week of the season, right? So it's completely bizarre, and it just does not add up. And I think the frustration of the coaching community in general and not being able to speak up against those that have the ability to make changes but weren't doing it. I think that frustration in itself and that pressure that built up, that's what kind of helped our organization just really just elevate itself here over the last few years to be in the position that it's in now.
I do want to share something with you. This is new, and if my screen goes funky, I apologize, but let's see if... Nope, it didn't work that way. This is something that is worth looking at. These are numbers that you actually provided with me, and so I've been working on trying to put up some kind of data that is manageable or understood. Oh, there we go. Now we're not stuck behind the screen. This is the average salary across all of the different coaches and coach levels at each sport in Florida. And I've ranked them by how much each get paid. And you can see football is at the top at $3,900, down to crew, which not many crew programs, just 4, down at $1,800. So you can see that range. It doesn't matter what sport you're participating in. As a coach, you're going to be averaging across the 9th grade, JV, assistant coach, you're going to be averaging between $1,800 and $3,900 for your salary. It's pretty meager for Andrew.
Oh, 100%. And you just think about what these coaches have to go through, right? I mean, the amount of scrutiny now, having to deal with different policies that are coming out of the state. So let me throw this at you, because this is something that I had to deal with yesterday. The state had passed last summer legislation that made it mandatory for every high school coach, every certified high school coach in the state of Florida to have a AED and CPR certification. And the prices have gone up on that. And a majority of your school districts or your schools are not even covering those costs. It's about $150 that these coaches have to come out of pocket now every year to go through, this training. And for most people, you look at $150 and it's like, okay, that's not that much money. But when you think about what these folks are making, they're taking out a substantial chunk of their own, check here just to make sure that they're certified in CPR and AED. And all those numbers you listed, like that's pre-tax, right? So most of these, men and women, that's an additional 23 to 25% that are being pulled away from that, supplement. And it's just not right. Again, you ask anyone if they're willing to work 1,500 hours in the hot Florida sun. Let's say you're a football coach, track coach, one of the outdoor sports, soccer, lacrosse, to be out there in that heat. I mean, for that pay, you're not going to find a lot of takers.
And that's become a problem that I've noticed in Florida is as a center here at FSU, I get requests from athletic directors who write me, "Hi, we're looking for coaches in the following sports. We need them by next week. Can you help?" Because there doesn't seem to be the demand I'll rephrase that. There doesn't seem to be the number of applicants that there used to be for coaching positions. And as you described to me a couple of years ago, we're hiring warm bodies rather than people who are qualified for that sport.
Which does not serve our student athletes in any way. Great. Because we want to have coaches that understand the sport, that can pass on knowledge, that can help build these young people up, right? And for some of them, help get them into that Division I or collegiate program, right? And certain times when you just have a warm body covering a sport, which seems to be happening more and more all across the state, you're actually doing the students a disservice more than anything else. Yes, they'll still be able to participate in the sport, but if they're not learning anything, if they're not picking up skills, if they're getting blown out every game, what are they actually learning?
Well, I think another concern I have as well is health and safety.
100%.
What if that coach is teaching skills inappropriately and those athletes are becoming more prone to injury and harm because the coach doesn't have the training necessary to be successful? Let's follow on with that statement and talk about training, because at the moment you alluded to coaches each year required to complete health and safety related training, concussion and first aid, etc. But it's not until after their third year of coaching they're required to take any formal training. That also is expensive, or can be expensive. And we see a massive drop off in coaches between year 1 and 3. Do you think it's because, it could be all of the above? Multiple choice question for you, Andrew. Do you think it's because coaches don't want to all of a sudden drop $250, $200 to get additional coaching on top of the $150 they're already paying each year? B, the coaches are done within 3 years because they discover that A, it's not worth it, B, it's too hard, I've got to deal with parents, etc. Or is it number 3, parents often become coaches to coach their child, and then when their child phases out of the high school, they're done?
I think it is all of the above and then some. The research that we've been able to complete with the FCC, the average lifespan of a coach in Florida is now 1.2 years. That's between all sports. So you have a coach that comes in and 1.2 years later they're gone. Wow. And I think it's a mix of all of the above. Personally, I think compensation plays a big role, because if you're being compensated more, I feel as if you would be able to put more time into the certification piece, where you would have to pick up X amount of hours to renew a certificate. But also now you have the scrutiny of dealing with transfers, your players being recruited, NIL now in high school, and another crazy decision by the state legislature, I believe, was to pass NIL pay for high school student athletes before doing anything on coaches' compensation. Yeah. Now you run into the issue where you actually, and it's not every kid, it's maybe your 3, 4, 5-star kids, they're making more money than your actual coach. I know it's bizarre. I was speaking to a coach out in Duval County, And the first week that NIL was made available, he had a player that signed a $20,000 NIL contract. That coach in Duval County was only making, I believe, Duval, it was a little less than $3,700 on a yearly basis. Yet his student made almost 6 times as much money as he did. That's just bizarre. So I just think that, it's a mix of everything. And I think one big issue here, that we're somewhat on the topic is the certification of high school coaches. If you're a certified teacher in the state of Florida, doesn't matter what subject area you teach, you can receive an athletic coaching certificate, which makes you able to coach for those 3 years, any sport. And that is a massive problem because these teachers do not, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them do not have any knowledge or skill set on, like we mentioned, health and safety protocols, on how to communicate with players. There's so much that they would be lacking. I think a lot of educators get into coaching thinking like it's almost the same as running their classroom, and they're polar opposites.
You're 100% right. I've described it as having a driving license. You go and become a certified educator, you have this driving license in education. Well, if I have a driving license, it doesn't qualify me to fly a plane because it has wheels, or a train because it has wheels on a track. No, they're specialist skills for each area of locomotion. We have this idea in Florida that if we get a driving license, it qualifies us to teach all of these things. And the reality is, as you alluded to, it doesn't. I do have a question in the chat that I want to bring in. We've talked about this a little bit in relation to other states. Jake says Texas and other states mandate that high school coaches teach or work on campus. That would be a radical change for Florida. Is there a path with the Department of Education to move in that direction?
I'll be honest. I think we're past that point. I think we really are past that point. I think it's something that can be worked towards in maybe 15, 20 years, but to have every coach work on campus, I think that would, require, quite a bit of coordination on the part of school districts across the state. I think that's, coordination with the DOE. And, one big issue, and this was not just secluded to Brevard County, it was really everywhere, is you only have X amount of teaching positions available at a school, right? And most coaches have a certification in physical education. But you run into the issue where you have your physical education teachers are those teachers that get a job and they stay on campus for 40, 45 years until they retire, not coaching anything, right? So how can we make it possible to maybe move teachers around to other schools, to bring in, those coaches into the high schools that have that physical education certification? I think that, there's a lot of pieces to it, but to, answer Dr. Von Scheer's question, do I see a path forward? No, I don't.
We've talked about the fact that coaches are poorly compensated in Florida, particularly in comparison to other states, neighboring states. And we have record of coaches leaving Florida to transition to South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, and beyond. We've talked about the fact that in general, coaches are poorly trained, or the requirements, I should say, are very low in order to be a coach. We've talked about the fact that the teacher unions are somewhat resistant to improving the coach stipends and salaries. And I had a county AD who said that they haven't had a raise in 30 years for coaches. And so the $5,000 they got back in 1990, well, that's 40 years into that. And in 1995 is still the same, even though we obviously know 5,000 goes a lot less in today's market. let's talk a little bit about change, because we can complain, we can explain, we can rationalize what's going on, but in order for things to change, something has to be done. What are you doing in the state to support this change, to make a difference for these coaches?
Yeah, absolutely. And not just myself, the great staff we have here at the FCC. What we've been able to do is educate the community on the issue and educate the legislators in the state on the issue. And what was completely just mind blowing for me is we had a meeting in Tallahassee, January of 2024, and this is what really got the ball rolling for us. So January of 2024, we held a meeting and we invited some state senators, state house members, high school coaches, and Coach Norvell, head coach Florida State football, was out there as well. And as we're talking about the issue, there was only a handful of legislators in the room. A lot of legislators sent their aides, which are just essentially college interns. We're taking notes. I think more than anything, they just wanted photos with Coach Norvell. But the legislators that were in the room were really just paying attention to what was being said. And two very important gentlemen were in the room. One was Corey Simon. Corey Simon, he played defensive end. It was D end or D tackle for Bobby Bowden, national championship winner, All-American, just Super Bowl winner. So he understood the issue to a degree. He had no idea about the compensation. And the second gentleman we had in the room, and he's really been that spark plug for us, his name is Adam Anderson. He's a representative from Pinellas County. And he was actually a high school football player. He had no idea what was going on. So after the meeting, just having conversations with them, I think more than anything else, Rep Anderson was just mind blown. And he said something along the lines of, when we talk to teacher unions, they've never mentioned this. They've mentioned issues with teachers, teacher compensation, etc. But we had no idea that coaches were bargained under teacher unions, or this was even a problem. I was like, yeah, it's a huge problem. So I think the main thing that we've been able to do to bring about change here in the state, and we're working towards something, I'll get to that, I'm sure, in a little bit, but it's educating, right? And what's great about, our entire staff is, outside of being coaches, we were teachers as well. And, as educators, I think we have a way of communicating and sharing this information in a way that is very easily understood. And it all comes down to just educating the public on really just how obscene this issue really is. When you think about it, $2.50 an hour to put in this work, head football coach, my goodness, you think about what these men have to go through on a daily basis. And they don't, during the fall season, they don't see their kids. They're not doing homework with their kids. They're not spending time with their wives. On weekends, they're reviewing film. School days, they're not getting home until 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, because after practice, they have to wait for the last student to be picked up. So, it is obscene what these individuals really have to deal with.
From that, you're educating, you're making people aware. Is there any actionable items that give coaches in this state hope?
100%. So this past April, we were back in Tallahassee, just meeting with different legislators across the state. We actually had Coach Willie Simmons from FIU joined us for that meeting, and just again continuing to educate them, having that data in front of them. And I think it's one of those things, in education in general, whether it's K through 12 or collegiate, data is what leads to change. And when you have that data and you can present that data and educate whoever your audience is on that data, I think it can bring about, just massive change. And we were able to, speak on the issue. A lot of the state senators and House members that were in the room already had been, briefed on the issue one way or another. But at the end of the day, Representative Anderson and Corey Simon, they held a press conference there in the Capitol Rotunda, basically saying change is coming. And one thing that I completely forgot, and I apologize for this, last April, Governor DeSantis actually came out and said, I'm tired of seeing our coaches leave Florida, go to Georgia, go to Texas. We need to fix this issue in Florida. None of that would have happened, I do not think, if it was for the Florida Coaches Coalition actually amplifying the issue, right? Because this has been an issue since 1970 or the early 1970s, because that's when coaches became part of teacher union bargaining units, right? And 50 years, nothing has changed on this issue. But over these last few years, by the work that we've been doing grassroots in each of the counties, meeting with legislators, meeting with coaches, athletic directors, that's what brought about this sudden about face, because the legislators themselves, again, they see it now that this is absolutely unacceptable for our coaches in all sports across Florida to be making less than minimum wage.
What then are we going to do? Is there going to be some? I struggle to believe that the teacher unions, given the position that they've held in Florida historically, are going to be hearing you speaking on this show and going, okay, Andrew, you've got a point. Coaches are not well paid. Let's fix all this. Because school districts are in budgetary concerns themselves, and teacher unions, not surprisingly, are going to look after teachers, number one. What actionable items can happen in order for this to change? How do we enact change in an environment that is resistant to change?
Yeah. So two things on this. So the first thing is, I'm glad right now we are in, I think in general, the tide changes very quickly when it comes to certain things politically, I think, within, this state specifically. But right now we are in a climate where we have a majority House, a majority Senate, a very well-respected Republican governor, all in line with the fact that they feel as if teacher unions have really held back teachers and coaches in the state of Florida, and they all see that, and they're on the same page. And while they may not be on the same page with certain other issues, they're all on the same page here with this, that the unions have actually worked against teachers. And I know there'll be some people that say no, but here's very quickly, teachers have always complained about salaries being low all across the country. What have unions done to change that last 50, 60 years? They're still complaining. They were complaining 60 years ago. They're still complaining today. Something must not have worked. But when going back now to the issue of coaches' compensation, the legislators have found a formula of actually bringing in funding or of having that revenue to actually fund this, so that it's not coming directly from school district budgets, right? It's coming directly from the state to the school districts to pay the coaches. And it's a formula that mixes in revenue from the Seminole Hard Rock Compact for sports betting. It is hemp tax. It is a specialized lottery game for that funds, high school coaching salaries. And what was the last one here? Yes, specialty license plate. Did I say specialty license plates? I don't think I did, but yeah. But it's all those together is what it would take to actually fund this. And when you look at it, we were able to work on a spreadsheet of data. Is very, a lot of time from our staff to put together, but to actually bring every current coach in the state of Florida to minimum wage based on the hours that they work, it is a little over 114 million. But when you think about the fact we have 67 counties in the state of Florida, it's a little less than $2 million per county to get every single high school coach up to minimum wage. And I think that is a worthwhile investment. And I think that the lawmakers in the state agree, because when you really look at the overall budget of the state, that's a little drop in the bucket.
I do want to share one more screenshot on something I've been working on. And this is, we were talking about head coaches. So let's see if this works. This is head coaches, their average salary. And what I did is I combined and again, rough draft here, everybody. So don't take this as final. This is exactly right. I'm still working on this, but you can see across here, the basketball, for example, I combined boys basketball, girls basketball. But again, you can see the salaries of the head coaches, again, ranging from 1,800 up to 5,300 for football. So if we go back to that original screen, yes, head coaches get paid a little more. No real surprise there. But again, we're looking at an average of about 5,300 tops. And you can see the range there, 3,000 to 14,000. So there is some variability depending on what county. And the data that I've run, Andrew, and I haven't shared this with you, but the data I've run has shown that county, where you live, what county you coach in really impacts that salary, which is an important one as well to consider, because this would be, if what you're proposing happens, it would be a significant boost for a lot of counties where SES is low, and these coaches are now making real money in a county where there isn't that much. And I think that's exciting for me.
No, 100%. And, as you were saying everything and you were, showing the statistics there, head coaches, all coaches all across the state that are putting in almost as much time, or in some cases even more time than your head coach, because your head coach may be a full-time AP teacher on campus. Yeah. So a lot falls onto the plate of an assistant coach, right? And I know football, for me, I know my head coach wasn't out there on Wednesday nights painting the football field. I know I was, right? So there's certain aspects of, just for assistant coaches now, they put in just, as much work, and they're making, half, maybe sometimes 70% less than what the head coach is making, and they're working almost as many hours.
Mm-hmm. If this happens, major change for Florida, I think it would transform coaching, and I would argue sports in Florida, because a lot of the great coaches do leave, especially where I live in Tallahassee. That border is not so far away, a 30-minute drive for me, and I'm coaching in another big school district in Georgia, making substantially more. So this I think would be a massive change. But I'm also concerned because as an educator, I'm very, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost insistent that if coaches do have a role, they should be trained to do the role. And is there any work in place to say, all right, if this happens, if we're going to actually dramatically increase the pay, the stipend, the supplement, whatever you want to call it, of coaches, let's make sure they're trained as well. Let's add some standards to this rather than, Andrew, congrats, you're making 10 grand a year coaching lacrosse. Do you know how to coach? You ever coach? No? Okay, well, you're still getting 10 grand a year. So you see my sarcasm, but my concern is, all right, you're paying coaches more. Are you going to do anything to make sure they're better at their job?
Yeah, so the expectation is, if you are making more money, if you're going to be paid more to coach here in Florida, the expectations of what it means to be a coach will go up as well. And that includes, that certification and, required mandatory classes that you would have to take during that certification period. Because again, we just don't want our coaches in Florida to be well paid. We also want them to be well educated and have the best knowledge and skill set of any group of high school coaches here in the state of Florida. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this already. I don't think I did, but the work is in progress right now to actually get legislation together. I know Representative Anderson and Senator Simon, they said it openly at that press conference that took place in April that, hey, we want to let everyone know this is coming. So I think there is a very, very high chance here at the next legislative session in January, we will see for the first time a comprehensive bill on the Senate or House floor that addresses coaches' compensation, that addresses certification, that addresses possibly NIL, recruiting, transfers. I think there is going to be something very big and something very comprehensive that will be coming. And I think it will take a lot of athletic directors by surprise. But I think there'll be a lot of coaches in the state that will be cheering on what will be happening.
If that happens, and my fingers crossed that it does, obviously, a coach may be saying, all right, Andrew, that's great. When would I actually be paid more? Are we talking 2026, 27, 28? Do you have any idea if this is proposed in January when something like this would be enacted?
If legislative session runs from January to March, if everything goes, I would say, as planned, and the House and the Senate can agree on a bill and the governor signs off, I see this implemented as soon as 26, 27. We're losing coaches more and more every year, and it's become an epidemic now. Mm-hmm. We have a little under 600 football programs. And I'm sorry I always refer to football. It's just the sport that I know best. And it's the one that has the most, media coverage. So it's easier to pull data and get information. So I'm not, necessarily trying to exclude lacrosse coaches or any other, sport. But I believe it's 598 football programs. This past year alone, we had 125 coaches that have left for some reason. As this season has begun, we already have 5 that have left. That's 130. And when you think about, 130 out of 600, I mean, we're going almost now. That's what, maybe 16, 17% turnover just on football coaches. When you think about now these other sports, my goodness, it's ridiculous. And what's great too is when we were in Tallahassee, I brought along some athletic directors, not just coaches. So athletic directors can speak on the issues that they were facing. And great athletic director from Cocoa High School, his name is David Kintai, longtime football coach, but now an athletic director, that shared that he can't even find coaches to plug in. And he doesn't even know what he's going to do sometimes, because you have these situations where Cocoa High School is one of the leading athletic programs in the entire state, but he can't find a swimming coach for anything. So what does he do? And you find athletic directors across the state running into similar issues. Up there in Tallahassee, Leon High School had to cancel their flag football season because they couldn't find a qualified, girls coach for flag. So you're running into these issues now where athletic directors will have to do one or two things, step into roles themselves, which a lot of athletic directors have done, or they just cancel the season or cancel the program. And again, at the end of the day, I think as educators and coaches, we're here to serve the students, and canceling a program, it doesn't do any good, right, for the student athletes.
Or they find a parent who says, I really want my kid to swim, so I'll step up and do it. I don't really know what I'm doing, but somebody needs to. And then as a consequence, we have somebody coaching without really any formal training or understanding of running a team. Andrew,
100%. And Oh, yep. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Please continue.
No, I was going to say, and especially when we think about, one thing as, educational administrators, we get, educated on liabilities and risk management. And from a liability and risk management position, it only makes sense to make sure that the coaches that you have that are on the field, in the gymnasium, in the weight room, we want to make sure that they are well trained and well equipped. We just don't want to throw anyone in there because,
Absolutely.
especially in a weight room, we actually had an incident here in the state last week where a student was, just doing, just presses, and he didn't have a spotter, right? And it's just one of those situations. Now, any qualified, certified coach would know, hey, you can't have this kid, bench pressing this kind of weight without anyone spotting him. And there was an accident in the weight room, and you come to find out that an assistant coach was in the weight room with the kid, but he was a volunteer coach. He was not a, certified coach. So that's going to be issues for that program, but you're seeing more and more of those issues now.
Yeah, very good point. And I think the better trained coaches are, the less risk involved with athletes. And I won't go into too much detail, but one of the comments I have heard is that the Department of Education, and I'm guessing FHSAA as well, what some of the biggest issues they have are coaches making mistakes, not necessarily intentionally, as is in the case of this weight training accident, but they just don't know. Nobody's ever taught them. Nobody's never discussed this as to say, hey, these are the regulations. These are the best practices. Those things seem to be missing. And as a consequence, we have a lot of upset parents. We have injuries. We have legal issues by coaches. And I think not only paying them better, but educating them accordingly is just going to improve all that as well. Okay, I want to be cognizant of your time. If somebody in Florida or outside of Florida is interested in what you're doing and how you're doing it, because guess what? I suspect many other states are in similar situations to Florida, where coaches tend to be underpaid. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you, get involved in Florida Coaches Coalition, and so on?
Yeah, so floridacoaches.com, or most of what we put out there, and probably easiest way to reach us is on Twitter, or now X, at PayFL Coaches.
Okay. And if somebody needs to reach out to you directly, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, if anyone needs to reach out to me directly, feel free to send me an email, andrew.ramjit, RAMJIT, at floridacoaches.com. Or you can reach me on X. My handle is just my name, Andrew Ramjit, all one word.
Awesome. Thank you. And before we go, talking about education, I do want to remind everybody of our Coaches Clinic, which is happening next month, October 25th. Whether you are down in South Florida, it's at Nova Southeastern University this year. We try to move it around the state so that we can reach different groups of people, make it accessible for travel. If you can't make this in person, we do have a virtual option this year. We've never done this before, so it will be an experiment, but you can watch live or get on-demand access to all of the speakers. It's just $20 if you're not coming in person, $30 if you're coming in person, $10 if you're a student. Learn, find new things to build into your program, find opportunities to make your athletes better. We have a wide range of speakers. One of them, Tessa Taylor, who was commenting earlier on our stream, is a member of FCC and involved with you, Andrew. So excited to see what she brings from her experiences coaching. Really a great opportunity to get involved, to learn something new. And now that we have the online version, hey, get involved from anywhere. Doesn't matter where. That's a wrap for us. I want to thank Andrew for joining me on episode 1 of season 6. Just a reminder, everybody, we try to do these every couple of weeks, so be sure to subscribe, like, share, wherever you're watching from. But on behalf of myself and Andrew Ramjit, thanks so much for watching.